Duelists, hi, welcome back to the channel. It's been quite a long time since I've recorded anything, but I think this is a very, very special occasion. With Burst Protocol right around the corner, I think we all know that branded Despia, as we know, is just completely changing. And I wanted to make a video because I've been seeing a lot of people talk about how the deck should be played, ratios, cards that are important. And I'm seeing a lot of people miss the mark, okay? And I don't want to sound elitist or anything, but you guys are behind, okay? And that event is not until February, which is the 300th YCS. That's when Burst Protocol will be legal. So I was thinking about gatekeeping a lot of this stuff, but I figured let's share it with some people. And let's see what you guys can do with it, because I honestly think what I'm about to expose to you guys, the lines of play that I'm about to show you guys in this video, is going to completely change your perception on how to play this deck. It is going to be a 40 card list, which is absolutely beautiful. And a lot of the cards that you've been relying on in the past, you'll find aren't in the deck anymore. So I don't really want to milk the intro any more than I have, so let's just get into it. So here's the list overall. It is a clean 40 cards, 17 spells, 1 trap, with 22 monsters. Now, I want you to look at this and I want you to just calm down a minute. I understand that it's very concerning at first glance, but let's go over the 2 new cards that are coming out. And they tie in with the importance of the ratio. So Fallen of the White Dragon is Fallen of Albaz at all times, which means you can only have a copy of 2 of this, because you obviously have to play Fallen of Albaz at 1. So this counts as the 3. If this card is in your hand, you can send 1 monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz from your extra deck to the graveyard, special summon this card. Also, you cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except level 8 fusion or synchro monsters. This card is normal or special summon. You can special summon 1 Ecclesia monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. You can only use this effect once per turn. And then into the new synchro monster, generic level 8. During the main phase, you can banish this card until the end phase. That's very important. And if you do special summon 1 Fallen of Albaz or 1 level 4 or lower monster that mentions it from your deck or graveyard. If this card is in your graveyard, you can target 1 level 8 fusion monster in your graveyard or banishment and 1 card in the field. Shuffle both this card into the deck. Shuffle both and this card into the deck. You can only use each effect of Ecclesia of the Black Dragon once per turn. Now, that was a lot, all right? It doesn't seem like a lot, but it was a lot. Now, let me break it down to you why the direction of this deck has completely shifted. So first thing I want to talk about is you'll notice there's no Serenor or Lubellion in the deck. Why is that? Because the only reason Serenor and Lubellion was in the deck was to get access to Branded Lost, okay? Branded Lost is a very important card for the deck. It essentially says your opponent cannot interact with your chain of fusions that you're going to be summoning. Now, since the deck has shifted into a direction of using a synchro monster, your first line of play should always be trying to get the synchro monster on the board. So if you're trying to get the synchro monster on the board, that automatically makes Branded Fusion dead. You cannot activate Branded Fusion if you have summoned a synchro monster previously in the turn. As a matter of fact, any monster other than a fusion monster. So that is super important, because now we have to try to figure out a way to get Lost on the board without relying on Branded Fusion, right? And Branded Lost generally isn't the first card that you want to search off of a Luber or any other branded spell searcher. But in this scenario, it is the case. Now, the other card I want to talk about is the card that came out in the structure deck, the Fallen and the Virtuous. This card is always treated as a branded and a dogmatica card, very important. Send 1 monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz from your extra deck to the graveyard. It does say 1 monster, doesn't just say fusion, so that's pretty cool. Then target 1 face-up card on the field, destroy it. That's what everybody's basically been using for the past couple of events. Everybody knows that. And then the last effect, if you have an Ecclesia monster in your field or graveyard, I hate how they say in your field, target 1 monster in either graveyard, special summon it to your field. You can only activate 1 of these cards per turn. So first thing we have to check is, do we have any Ecclesia monsters in the deck? Of course we do. We have incredible Ecclesia, because Cartasia and Quim are not Ecclesia monsters. So this is the one that's going to be triggering that or making that the most useful. So let's segue from this into the girl count. Okay, we've got 3 girls here, and we're only playing one of each. We can play one of each in this version for a couple of reasons. Number one, we'll start with Incredible Ecclesia. It's because she's just the throwaway card. She's what you want to be summoning off of Fallen of White Dragon because he locks you into special summoning an Ecclesia monster. So that's the one you want to be specialing, all right? It's going to go to the graveyard. No big deal. It'll recur itself if we don't banish it. Number 2, Cartasia. As you can see, we don't play any Fusion Deployment in this deck. And the reason we don't play Fusion Deployment is because Fusion Deployment locks you into fusions, all right? We want to get to our Synchro because our Synchro is going to be our highest chance of survivability and combo rate. So we don't want to ever be at a point where we can't get to that card, okay? And then Quem. Now, Quem is the controversial one. This could be played at 2, but because it's the only one out of the girls that you don't want in your hand, okay? Now, while I'm saying that, there is something that can fix that card being in your hand, and it is Springen's Kit, okay? So if you are actively playing your turn, you should always be getting to Kit. So worst case scenario, you do open Quem, you get to Kit, you put Quem on the bottom of your deck, okay? So I'll go into that with a couple of plays later, and it'll really make sense for you guys. And I want to hit on the importance of why we don't play Fusion Deployment anymore is because right here, also you cannot special summon from the extra deck except Fusion monsters the turn you activate this card. So if you activate it, you cannot get into your Synchro monster. If you did get into your Synchro monster, then seeing any copies of this was dead no matter what. And getting into your Synchro monster is way stronger than just plopping a Cartasia on the board and proceeding to Fusion Summon. Let's talk about the odd part of the deck. I have 9 hand traps. I've got 3 Ash, 3 Droll, and 3 Fuwalos. Why do I have those? Well, number 1, because the Albaz monster lineup that I have is just the exact monster count you need for the deck to be able to flow and go. You don't need any more than this. This is the bare minimum that you have to play for everything to work. The other reason is High Spirits. It can throw away Fuwalos and a Rinbrom, and it can throw away Droll and Lockbird and a, where's this girl at? And where is she? I always have a problem seeing this card. Dust Dragon, okay? So that is going to get you access to Fallen of the White Dragon, and Fallen of the White Dragon is the best way to start your turn with this deck. So every single card in this deck except Ash Blossom has a High Spirits target. Now, let's talk about Tragedy. Tragedy's target is Construct, and so is Aluber's target. That's super important for 2 reasons. Number 1, High Spirits on the Tragedy will also net you an Aluber and a Fallen of the White Dragon, which basically opens you up to getting to Branded Lost and to getting to the rest of your board. So this is what we're using now to facilitate to getting to Branded Lost, is triple Aluber as your normal summon. It is the only normal summon you want to normal summon in the deck going first, and then your Tragedy as a supplement for Branded and High Spirits and Gold Sarcophagus. Now I'm sure you're wondering, why aren't you playing Foolish Burial as well? So the reason for that is because Gold Sarc will trigger Mercurier and it'll trigger Tragedy. So if you need to get to Fallen of White, because that's what you should be prioritizing, you're gonna Gold Sarc the Mercurier away. If you already have access to Fallen of the White, this leaves you room to Gold Sarc Tragedy, so that'll make sure you get the Aluber, which makes sure you get into Branded Lost. The other thing that I want to talk about ratio-wise is the Fallen of the Virtuous and Branded Opening. Now, the Fallen of the Virtuous is an amazing card. In most decks, it's been played at 3, some at 2, as of recently. But this card is not a card that you need to open going first. Ignore the side deck. The side deck is just a lot of good cards that I think could be the case when Burst Protocol comes out. I have no idea what the format's going to look like. I have no idea if Habakiri is going to still be at 3. I've got no idea if Herald's going to be banned. I've got no idea. This is just spitball idea. However, Fallen of the Virtuous, I'll show you in a couple of the combos, only needs to be at 1 copy because you're going to be searching it, okay? And then if you open it, it's something that you don't have to search. You can grab something else. So it's just a good one-off. Branded Opening. Now, you see it at 2. The reason Branded Opening is at 2 and not 3, I'm sure you're wondering, well, don't you want to get to Aluber as much as physically possible? Yes, that is the case. However, it is not a card you want to start your turn with, because if you start with Opening and you have a Synchro play, then you're going to basically be locked into just going into Branded Fusion, and Branded Fusion does not net you as big of a board as getting into a synchro play, and it doesn't give you as great of recursion as the synchro play does for this deck. So I don't want to maximize on the opening just for the sole fact of I want to reduce the risk of having to open or lead with Branded opening. It's still good, it's fine, but it's more of I've got my synchro out of the way, now I want to play opening. Then you have your other ratios. Your in reds at 1, your in whites at 1, your lost is at 1, obviously. And then we're going to, called by, Ash kills the deck. We want to make sure we're knocking that out. It also lets you hit Droll and Lockbird and Fuwalos, and then cross out. I want an event with cross out in my deck at 3 because I hit some Ash Blossoms. If you're playing Branded Fusion in a deck, I strongly think that cross out should be in your deck. We get to play Ash Blossom because Ash Blossom is also now a counter to Fuwalos, so it is even better going first and having it in your deck, and it can double as a cross-out target. Gold Sark, like I said, has the option for Mercurier or Tragedy, and Foolish Burial doesn't make the cut because we want to stay at an even 40. If we were playing double Tragedy, it would make sense to play Foolish Burial, but we want to keep it at an even 40. We don't want to just play Foolish Burial because the off chance of you having Foolish Burial and opening a Tragedy with only one Tragedy in the deck, there's nothing for you to foolish. Honestly, there really isn't. You can justify throwing something away, obviously, but there's no real practicality of it. So if you're gonna play foolish, there has to be 2 Tragedy in there, okay? And then the last card I think needs to be addressed. We need to talk about the elephant in the room, Nadir Servant. Now, I'm sure you're looking at me going, you're an idiot. There's not even a Maximus in this deck. What if I told you that Nadir Servant is actually crazier than resolving Branded Fusion by itself in this deck? Exactly. That's what you would say. But I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that with just using Nadir Servant by itself. The other thing about this deck is that if your Branded and High Spirits gets ashed, which by the way, this is the card that should be ashed now, not Branded Fusion. And I'll go into the combo of why that is the case. But you want to do as many things as possible, or you want to have as many cards as possible, essentially that's going to bait out hand trap interactions, and then you still have a powerful card that can still end on a full board. That's what Nadir Servant is, right? So unfortunately, you can't High Spirits, get into your Synchro, and then also use Branded Fusion. So that cuts that card out of the equation for establishing a board. So that leaves Nadir Servant. So I'm going to get into a couple of these plays because I think showing you guys is really going to put it in perspective instead of just talking about it. Save that. First thing I'm going to start with is the Branded and High Spirits play with Tragedy. I'm sure you guys know Branded and High Spirits and every other monster other than Ash Blossom in this deck will get you to Fallen and White. But obviously, I'm sure you guys aren't really thinking this. I've not seen anybody talk about using Construct, but we're going to get into it, okay? So we're going to dump the Construct because it is a fairy with 2,500 defense. Pitch the Tragedy. We're going to search the Fallen and White. We're also going to use the Tragedy to search a Luber. Now we are completely set up. This was also in the draw phase, so we're dodging Droll and Lockbird. If Droll and Lockbird is at 3 at the time, we're going to use Fallen and White's effect, and we're going to actually send Devouring, the dragon that devours a Dogma, okay? Trigger Fallen and White. We're going to special the only Ecclesia monster that we have, but it's awesome because it can be from it can be from hand, deck, or graveyard, so it doesn't matter if we open it. And we're just going to go into a Synchro play here. Obviously, this means Branded Fusion is dead for the turn. We're going to put her on the board and immediately banish her to special. Now, this is another option for Ash Blossom, but like I said, if you just would have Ash Blossom, Branded, and High Spirits, Tragedy wouldn't have been sent to the graveyard and you wouldn't have a dragon that devours the Dogma. But just in case maybe you didn't think it would get that bad, this is where you would Ash Blossom, because now, since a Synchro monster has been put on the board, Branded Fusion isn't even live. So I can't even follow up with a Luber, search Branded Fusion, and then make a board out of it, okay? So now we're going to simply grab Kit. Kit's super important because Kit allows us to get into our fusion play that we're looking to get into. We're going to search Branded and White. We're going to put Ash Blossom on the bottom of deck. We're going to normal summon a Luber. We're going to use the effect to search, you guessed it, the Branded Lost. This is how we want to layer our combos now since we don't have Lubellion in the deck to just send off of Branded Fusion. We're going to activate Branded and Lost, and then we're going to follow up with Branded and White, which is amazing because Ash Blossom cannot negate this, And Ghost Spell cannot negate this because the Ghost Spell negates activation and Branded Loss protects against that. So that is awesome. That's something the deck's never really had the dynamic of making a board through this. We're going to simply banish the Construct because it is a light. That obviously plays a part. And we're going to banish the Fallen in White because it is Fallen of Albaz. Special Albion. We're not going to trigger Albion effect. We're just not going to, because it would make you have to waste a fusion monster essentially. You'd basically be making either Masquerade or Quarterus, and we're just not doing that right now. But we will trigger Lost because we're going to search for Mercurier. Okay? This is going to guarantee that we have a monster effect negate at the end phase or any point in time. Because it doesn't make sense to, we've already used our normal summon. It doesn't make sense to grab Albion and draw a random card. It doesn't make sense to grab Cartesia because, well, we need Cartesia to stay in the deck because this can only special summon from deck or graveyard, so we don't want it in our hand. But anyway, I digress, and we're just going to go straight to the end phase. We're going to trigger the Devourer, and why is this important? Because we're going to get the Fallen and the Virtuous added to hand. We're going to activate it. We're going to send Titaniclad to the graveyard, popping Albion. Boom. We're going to use Titaniclad effect. We're going to special summon Quim, and Quim's actually going to send the Fallen of Albaz. Now we're set up there. And what do we do here with 3 fusion monsters? We actually trigger Albion, and we set Retribution. Retribution is an amazing card. The first effect is amazing. When a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster, return to the deck 1 face-up fusion monster you control or 2 fusion monsters in your graveyard that mention Fallen of Albaz as material. And if you do, negate the activation, and if you do that, destroy that card. Cool reason why this is important is because this protects against Bestials, okay? Obviously, getting Albaz out of the graveyard is super important. So that's going to protect against a Bestial during your opponent's turn if they were looking to interrupt one of your plays. So this is also going to recycle 2 monsters here. So we're going to set this bad boy. In phase, we actually get to add this back to hand to use it as discard fodder for the Fallen of Albaz. Branded High Spirits doesn't get to come back because we used it. We have Tragedy in our graveyard as a follow-up. It gets to reset Branded Retribution after you use it on your opponent's turn. Or it can just grab Fallen in the Virtuous or Branded in White. Fallen in the Virtuous becomes even better because you'll have access, or you'll have a decision to be able to keep Ecclesia in your graveyard if you're discarding it off of Fallen of Albaz during your opponent's turn. Therefore, you get to special summon any monster from the graveyard. So a typical follow-up play of how things will look on this. And I'm so sorry, I'm so dumb. The most important part is getting the Ecclesia of the Black Dragon back. Pass to your opponent's turn, and this is where it all comes together because this is incredible. Ashing this card means this card still comes back, and you still get to have lines of play with Cartesia, okay? So you'd end up banishing this. You'd get Cartesia out of the deck. Boom. Then you just go Cartesia effect, putting the Alubra in the graveyard because Alubra has that graveyard effect. And then we get to go into our Dust Dragon. Dust Dragon gets to be Chainlink 1, Quim can be Chainlink 2, and Branded Loss can be Chainlink 3. We're simply just searching for a follow-up card for our turn. Boom, if they have a monster in their extra monster zone for whatever reason, or extra deck monster, you can simply go declare, throw this away, and then you get to get into your Mirror Jade. All right? Boom, Mirror Jade gets to activate, punishing another card. Opponent tries to extend, you get to go the Albion that you previously sent, and the Devouring Dragon. Boom. Negate another summon, etc. Still having the Tri-Brigade Mercurier in your hand as well. And on top of that, you're going to get another Branded Spell or Trap search. This is where you would generally search Branded Fusion for the kill. That's where you would go into Branded Fusion. Branded Fusion is a crackback card, not a starter card anymore. This also allows you to banish Branded Retribution during your next turn, because you can only use 1 Branded Retribution effect per turn. But more likely than not, you want to banish Tragedy to set this so you can have that follow-up as well. At the end phase, you'll obviously be able to recur this. You'll obviously be able to recur this as well. So you're putting a lot of cards back into your hand. We're lagging there. And then we'll obviously be able to return the Branded and High Spirits to our hand too. So as you can see, that's a lot of follow-up. Dust Dragon also has an effect if your opponent's extending for whatever reason. We're going to get into Aquarius, and then we're going to be able to turn your opponent's monsters' attacks to 0 unless they're level 8 or higher fusion monsters. So that's why Branded in High Spirits is way more important to resolve, because it gives you that grind because of this. And like I said, on top of that, at the end of the turn, this card keeps coming back. Nothing more annoying than a card that just keeps coming back that has this potential. Because the other thing is, this can special a monster from the graveyard. So even if you didn't grab Cartasia from the deck, you could just special Fallen of Albaz from the graveyard. And that'll allow you to discard and play and then get into whatever. If you used Retribution earlier in the turn and you put back Devouring Dragon, the other option is you could have just made a Devouring Dragon with the Albaz, and then you could have actually shuffled back the Fallen of White Dragon that you had banished, and then another card that you had from your graveyard or your opponent's graveyard to any form of interruption. So that's the Branded in High Spirits line with the Tragedy. Let's look at other things. All right, I'm going to go with the worst case scenario here. Look at this hand. It's absolutely awful, but it's not unplayable. So we're going to ditch the Droll Lockbird. We're going to ditch the Dust Dragon, and then we're going to get into our Fallen of White Dragon. That's why this is super important to ash this card as the first play, because your opponent could have absolutely nothing and nothing to go off of. But now because you allowed that, we get to dump this, and we get to go the Brigand, put that in the grave, trigger this on the summon, special into the Ecclesia monster, and then we get to go Synchro into our only Synchro. I don't know why I'm fumbling around for this. Banish this, special summon the Kit. Kit's going to search out the Branded in White, because that's still very important for this. And we're going to put one card from our hand back on the bottom of the deck. And obviously, as you can see, because we couldn't get to a Luber, we don't have a Branded Lost. But that's okay. Your opponent's just going to be able to interact with you. And in this line of play, you actually just have to banish, as long as we're not lagging, you just have to banish the Ecclesia. This card's not going to come back, obviously. We want to keep the Dust Dragon in the graveyard because it is the one that's going to be the most live, because it can still banish itself from the graveyard to special summon a Despia monster. Or a Dogmatica monster, but for us it'd be Despia. And then we're just going to go into the Albion. You don't have to activate an effect, nothing here. It won't get you anywhere, but you still in phase get into essentially the same line of play, right? You search your one of card here. You search your one of, activate this, boom, send Titaniclad. Titaniclad's going to send, Albion's going to pop. Titaniclad's going to trigger. We're going to special Quim. Quim's going to send Albaz, and then you can still set the Retribution, or you can set the Branded in red, depending on what your hand is, but I'm always going to be setting the Retribution, all right? So we'll just bottom of deck. Don't forget your Synchro monster, and this is what you're left with, okay? Nothing crazy, but it essentially is the exact same board. In this line of play, you're going to most likely open up with something of the nature. You're waiting for your opponent to firstly extend. You're going to go Retribution. Very important that you're shuffling this back in and this back in, because the play that you're looking for here is the typical banish, and then you get to special summon Fallen of Albaz here. Fallen of Albaz gets to throw this away, this bad boy away, and then you can actually take two monsters that they control, depending on the attributes, obviously. Or you can get into another Mirror Jade. This is going to trigger. You have the ability to trigger Quim, but you don't have... You could special Albaz back, obviously, but you already used the effect, so it's kind of whatever. But this gives you the opportunity to put your Dust Dragon back in the deck, and then your Fallen or your Incredible Ecclesia. So it's not the best, obviously, because we're looking for our Branded Lost or our Luber so we can continue with plays. But this is a similar play route. You're just missing your Branded Lost. All right? All right, so the elephant in the room, Nadir Servant. Send one monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, then add one Dogmatica monster or Fallen of Albaz from your deck or graveyard to your hand that has attack less than or equal to the sent monsters in the graveyard. Also, for the rest of the turn, you can, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. You can only activate one Nadir Servant per turn. Now, the reason why Nadir Servant is super important is because once you go down a high spirit line and they ash the high spirit, you need a card that's going to be able to stand alone to get you a better board. And honestly, Nadir Servant inboard is better than a regular Branded Fusion inboard. I promise you that, as far as the recursion rate goes. On top of that, if any of your cards get stopped, you want to be able to end on something. You want to be able to have a card in your deck and or hand that's going to allow you to give you a formidable board. You want to play as many cards that can stand alone in this deck as possible. All right. So we're going to activate Nadir Servant, still send the Devouring Dragon. And because this card is always treated as Fallen of Albaz, we get to search it. We're going to special by sending the Titanic Clad. We're going to trigger, and we're going to just special this bad boy. Or bad girl, I guess, whatever. And then we're going to go straight to the end phase. We're going to end phase Titanic Clad effect. And this is where it's a little different. If we don't lag. We're going to special Quim, and Quim's going to actually send Cartasia here. Okay? In phase, we're going to still trigger Dogma, and we're going to search our one of. Like I said, this card doesn't need to be at 3 in this deck, depending on the format, obviously. I don't really know what's important to hit. But then we can actually just send the Albion, and we can throw this card away. Not a big deal anymore. Still in the end phase, we're going to be able to go Albion here. This is going to set us up to stop a bestial play if we need to be. But here it is. Opponent's turn, they're starting to play, they're doing whatever the case may be. Put an extra deck monster on board. Perfect. We left the Albaz in the deck. We're going to summon the Albaz. We're going to trigger. We're going to take, and we're going to make Mirror Jade. All right? We're going to let our opponent play a little bit. We're going to go Mirror Jade effect. We're going to send an Albion. Boom. Banish a monster on the field. What do we do here? We're going to Quim here. I'm sorry. We're going to Quim here, and then we are going to special summon the Cartasia. All right? So then that obviously opens you up to a little more synchro play. So like I said, if you only had Nadir Servant, this lets you wall up a little bit, right? So you can use this. You obviously don't want to get rid of Mirror Jade, but keeping the Quim on board is pretty important here. So number one, you can go straight into a Dust Dragon. Dust Dragon can trigger, and this lets you actually send Renbrum. Renbrum will actually be able to banish itself to special summon back Fallen a White Dragon if you want. So if you're still in the process of walling up, I should say, you get to do something like this, special this bad boy. Here you go, and then its effect, because you used it during your turn last turn, so now it gets to even special summon this back. And so you've got 4 monsters back on board. You only had Nadir Servant. Your opponent's not really breaking the board. You get to search a Branded Fusion at the end of the turn. Our Cartasia will recur herself. And if your opponent special summons a monster via a monster effect, you get to use this and put a Quarterus on board. Quarterus is going to allow you to change everything on the board to 0, meaning your opponent is going to have a very, very, very difficult time killing you through all of the interruption that only Nadir Servant gave you. And because you get to play a higher hand trap impact on this list, potentially having cards like Droll and Ash Blossom in your hand will help lessen the blow of your opponent pushing through. And not to mention Branded Retribution still, so the Albion from last turn, and then putting this in there. Because if you can get your Quim to stay on board, it'll allow you to grab Mirror Jade back during your turn. You don't have a Tragedy Engraved to reset, so you can even, at the end phase, boom, recur the Cartasia, in phase, Albion effect, search into your Branded Fusion if you want, because like I said, Branded Fusion is the crackback card. And you're going to start your turn with all 3 of these on the board here with a Branded Fusion and your Quim live to grab back Mirror Jade. All this strictly from a Nadir Servant. There's almost no interaction with it. If it's your starting card, your opponent can Ash Blossom it, but there's not a better starting card other than High Spirits, because if you just open Branded Fusion and your opponent had Ash, they're going to Ash that too, and it's going to leave you with absolutely nothing. And while you're playing a build with Branded Fusion and you're not playing dead cards like Lubellion to get into Lost via that match or via that route, then you're looking at a much stronger card like Nadir Servant to get you into a grind game board, all right? Now, everything that I'm talking about is bearing the ban list that's going to be coming around Burst Protocol and what the format looks like there. If I were to take the format right now, if I had Burst Protocol legal right now, actually I can't even say that. If I had Fallen in White legal right now and Ecclesia of the Black Dragon legal right now, when we're having the Mitsurugi Yummy Draco Tail stuff running around, this is what I would be playing. Okay, this is how I would play it. And I actually would have 3 Super Poly in the extra deck, or sorry, the side deck. I don't really know what would come out here. These are all pretty good options, but the big reason here, because like I said, if Draco Tail was full power, Super Poly would be in there. That's why we're playing the Secretarian Dragon, because one, you can make it during game 1 situations, because you play spellcasters and dragons. So it's a good going second card if you really need to make it. Super Poly obviously takes away the Draco Tail board, so you can get into this. Ints being another target that you send off a Nadir Servant going second, so you can pop a card, and then you can get into Fallen of the White Dragon to get into other board breakers. Everything is just very cyclical here, okay? I realized that you only have to play 9 Albaz related cards, because they all get you to everything, all right? You just need to play the 3 Albaz, the 3 girls, and Albaz again, I guess, and Mercurier and Springen's Kit, because throughout all combo lines, throughout all fusion lines, these are the cards that always come up. You don't need more than one. You don't need anything else, because cards like this pull from the deck and graveyard. Cards like this pull from the hand, deck, and graveyard. The only card you don't want in your hand is Quem. And like I said, if you're able to play the game, you're going to be able to get to Kit. If you get to Kit and Quem is in your hand, you're going to be able to put Quem back on the bottom of your deck, allowing Titaniclad to bring it out of the deck. Opening Incredible Ecclesia is fine, because like I said, you can pull Ecclesia out of your hand with Fallen a White Dragon, allowing you to still play. The Drone Lock Birds and the Fuwalos are going to help you go second, because as of right now, hand traps it's been pretty much, they're better than board breakers, as Draco Tail has been showing everybody. So if it was right now, because like I said, again, I don't know if board breakers will be better than hand traps at a later date. Plot twist though, usually every time people think board breakers are best, about a month in, we find out hand traps are better. So having 9 hand traps, 9 very powerful hand traps that can also double as fodder for high spirits to get you into the best starting engine possible is only a win-win. And then obviously using the triple Aluber and double opening, having 5 ways to get into Branded Lost to help you secure your plays, while also having Tragedy, of a combination of having Tragedy and triple high spirits can help you get to Aluber that'll get you to Branded Lost as well. Remember, you can't start with opening, discard Tragedy, special Aluber, search Aluber, do anything of that nature, because this will lock you into fusion monsters for the rest of the turn. So if you're going to be using opening and your plan is to get into your synchro, make sure you get into your synchro first. Branded opening is 2, because it's not the card that I want to start my engine with. I want to start my turn with Brandon and High Spirits and Fallen a White Dragon, because it's what gives you the best grind game. It gives you the best ability to use all your cards efficiently and cyclically. And then still being able to play Call By and Cross Out, so you can hit Ash Blossom, so you can hit Fuwalos, and so you can make it so your plays are being able to go through as often as possible, is just chef's kiss. The only thing I would consider playing more than one of is Fallen of the Virtuous, but like I said, as long as the first card you're sending is Dragon that Devours of the Dogma, you're going to get access to it. If your plays are going through and you open Fallen of the Virtuous, what I usually do is I put it back on the bottom of the deck, and then I search it off of this, or I just grab Mercurier instead if I didn't have access to Lost, because I always want to try my best to start my opponent's turn with Mercurier, and during my opponent's turn, I'll use Albion the Shrouded Dragon. So I think moving forward, we need to start focusing away from Branded Fusion, because Branded Fusion isn't really a standalone card anymore. It's not as powerful. It gets fine if you just had Branded Fusion and you played the Lubellion, then if only card was Branded Fusion. You send the Lubellion, you send the Albaz, you put the Albion on board, tribute it for Lubellion, put Branded Lost on board, and then you get to in-phase set off of off of Albion, or now you can search the Virtuous. Virtuous can send Titaniclad, pop the Libellion, Titanic or Quem send what's it called, Cartasia or Fallen and white. There's like other ways to do it, but it doesn't net you as much as what other cards we have now, strictly because Fallen a White is a much stronger card. So the focus should be switching away from rushing into Branded Fusion, and it should be rushing into getting to Fallen a White in your hand, which is why I think Nadir Servant is better in longevity-wise and grind game-wise, and which is why I think the Synchro option is way more prevalent, because the dragon itself is crazy. Because if your opponent were to Ash anything in the combo, one, it needs to be branded in High Spirit so you don't set up a fusion in your graveyard, 2 fusions in your graveyard, mind you. And then if they Ash the actual Synchro, then obviously you're locked out of branded fusion. But what that means is that dragon still comes back, and you can special Albaz from your deck still. Or you can even special Fallen a White from the graveyard. Then that triggers to special Ecclesia from the graveyard, and then you can tribute off that and special Fallen of Albaz and discard and take a monster. Regardless, it still allows you to get into Albaz. So the best thing to Ash is definitely High Spirits. And then if my option was to have High Spirits and Branded Fusion in my hand, or High Spirits and Nadir Servant in my hand, I'm going High Spirits and Nadir Servant every single time, because I should be under the impression that my opponent is going to, and they're going to try to interact with High Spirits more than anything. I'm going to give my opponent the grace that they're going to make a smart decision and not let me get to the white dragon. All right. So I'm going to upload this. As you guys are seeing this, that's my first video back. I'm looking for some feedback. I don't even care if it's positive. If you guys have things to say, leave it in the comments. Message me on Twitter, LoftonTcg. Let me know how you feel. I wanted to get this out because we've got a few months before the deck becomes what I would think is full power. So maybe we can finagle some things together and we'll go from there. So until then, thank you guys.